What's up, everybody? It's Pikel with League of Items, and today we are joined in a somewhat weekly thing at this point with Billy. Billy, how's it going?
It's going well, man. Excited to talk some league. We got a great slate of DFS tonight, so I'm hoping to get that Pikel bump once again
Yeah,
coming out of this thing.
true. Yeah, last week you did have a nice tournament the day of the video, right?
Yeah, I believe that's day of night. I get confused with these overnight slates. I never know what day to call it.
Yeah, yeah, very true. Yeah, since we last spoke, you won a contest, and then I won two tickets to that like Rift qualifier thing. So we're doing pretty okay right now.
Absolutely.
So we're gonna do the global power rankings and the EGOT rankings. So we're gonna get started in North America. A crazy weekend in North America, really around the world. The past week has been kind of insane for League of Legends
Yeah,
matches.
that was one of my question, or my only question for you that I had here, and maybe a good way to kick it off. So of the three top teams to get knocked off this weekend, T1, Cloud9, and Top Esports, which one surprised you the most?
So I think the T1 upset was the most surprising, not because they lost, but because of how they lost. I think that the drafting was concerning, but the decision making was even more concerning. And it might be the kind of situation where it's good that they tried this kind of composition during the regular season on stage, because it was just extremely risky, and the fact that they gave up an Infernal Soul and then just like continued to try to fight, it was their only option. So I was glad that they played it out and like we're trying to still win these team fights, but you have to know better at this point, that you can't just give away all these dragons. I think that we're in a very interesting spot for the meta, because I think we're going to see teams leveraging even more into like mid game, because right now there's a big separation between mid game and late game in terms of team compositions. The one thing that late game team compositions can generally do is outscale and eventually be able to contest one of the final dragons. But right now, it just seems like the mid game team compositions, when they get those couple of dragons under their belt, they're able to compete with the late game team composition for like another couple of minutes, and that really shifts everything, because it's not only that final dragon fight, it's also their power level when they get to a Baron fight. It's just really bizarre. So I still think we have some time where teams like Cloud9 and these like very early and mid game teams are going to be the best of the best, but I still anticipate late game team compositions coming around, and I'm not sure what that's going to require. So the one way I would look at it is like there are a lot of card games out there like Hearthstone, and you can have a late game deck where you need certain cards to bridge yourself and like buy you enough time to get to the late game. I think that we're going to see late game team compositions kind of implement some early and mid game champions to help them get to the later stage and contest those dragons throughout the game. That's the only way they can really survive in this kind of meta. So it'll be interesting to see how this all kind of plays out. In terms of Top Esports and Cloud9, I think Cloud9, I'm not surprised that they lost. It is a little surprising that it was 100 Thieves, but it's much easier to see them lose in a best of one than like Top Esports
Sure.
in a best of three. I think V5.
Yeah.
I thought that V5 had a shot last night because of not last night, a few nights ago, because of their match against Fun Plus Phoenix. That's all I needed to see from V5 to know that they can compete with these teams. It's not that I think they're going to go out and beat all of these teams consistently. It's just they need to be taken seriously by the top teams in China right now. In Game 1, Top Esports played a Karma mid. Like, they made the same mistake that Evil Geniuses made by putting Jizuke onto Karma. It's just not a champion that really fits their playstyle. They're limiting them way too much, and they have to like repress a lot of their instincts when they're on that champion. So at different times...
Especially the way Knight's been playing since, for the last 4 months. He's just been,
Yeah, exactly.
crazy.
If you, like, there was one dragon fight in particular where Jackie Love was like trying to make his way into the river, and Knight on Karma was standing right next to Jackie Love, and they both died. So it's like, you did something wrong. You're not doing this the right way. Like, this is a good combination of champions. Like, what are we doing here?
Right.
Yeah, it was just pretty surprising. So let's get into the EGOAT rankings for the North American LCS. What do you got? Or actually, I'll tell you my rankings first, because these are my rankings from last week that I made after our video. So right now in North America, I have Cloud9 as the best team in North America. I had, because I will change these today actually. This was from 7-9. So I had Cloud9 as first, Evil Geniuses as second, TSM, Team Liquid, FlyQuest, Golden Guardians, CLG, 100 Thieves, Immortals, and Dignitas. And I think that after this week, it'll probably be somewhat different, but not fundamentally different.
Sure. So for the LCS, here I have C9 still at the top, 100 Thieves second, FlyQuest third, Team Liquid fourth, TSM fifth, and the bottom CLG, Immortals, Evil Geniuses, Golden Guardians, and Dignitas last.
Wow.
Huge jump from 100 Thieves in the numbers. They get a ton of credit for beating C9, perhaps unsurprisingly.
Well, and FlyQuest, beating FlyQuest.
And FlyQuest as well, right? Yeah, it was a really good weekend for them from a sort of strength of schedule, quality victory perspective. For me, I went back and forth, sort of from a the model building standpoint on Saturday night after the big change here as to whether that was appropriate, and sort of what I wanted to happen. And I'm not going to change anything based on one outcome, but after sort of noodling on it, I feel I'm okay with it. I think that the narrative, which I think most people agree with, and I think we've talked about, that the LCS has been C9 and everybody else, that they're certainly a tier above the rest of the teams in the LCS, and everybody else is sort of middling compared to other teams in the Power 4 conferences. And to me, just the fact that 100 Thieves has the ceiling to beat C9, even if C9 made some bad decisions and whatsoever, that to me is enough to say, okay, of this group of teams that maybe isn't that good in terms of the level that we're talking about, I think just having that upside is enough for me to say, okay, yeah, you for now you can be at the top of that heap, especially given that the separation between them and FlyQuest and Team Liquid, who and TSM, who were, I think, the three teams that sort of qualitatively would be above them. I was okay with that.
Yeah, I think that this is the perfect example of what we were talking about a few weeks ago on Twitter, when someone was asking, like, that kind of seems ridiculous. Shouldn't you be making adjustments for that kind of thing? And we were both like, nope. Let the numbers tell us what they want to tell us, and we can adjust afterwards. So I think this is probably it's a good learning opportunity for us to see how big something like a gigantic upset will shift the EGOAT ranking. So what does that mean for 100 Thieves? It means that people will be unrealistically hyping up 100 Thieves. They'll say they beat C9, they could beat anybody. So they're going to go into a bunch of these matches against other good teams and just get slapped around probably. And then that'll just be a lot of fun to watch for me personally, because I love overreactions. That's the best part about League of Legends. Easily the best thing about League of Legends is overreacting one way, overreacting the other way. Just the community is like out of their fucking minds. It's amazing. It's just awesome.
Even having started to play a little bit, like you even see it like in game, like these guys, like the other team gets like one kill at like 10 minutes, and somebody's like, oh, forfeit, like it's over, forget about it. Like we totally lost.
It happens almost every single game, no matter what level you're in, and that's one of the reasons why I've been championing this idea of like creating a new server. Like, have you heard of the Ionia server in Korea and China? Like, how Teacher Ma was like threatening being like kicked out of the league or whatever, supposedly.
I saw somebody that I think it may have been you, but somebody in my Twitter feed mentioned something about an Ionian server. But that's the first I'd heard about it.
So in China and Korea, they have a server with like the best players from each region that you have to be good enough to get into the server. So it's like all the best of the best. And Teacher Ma was being threatened with getting kicked out of the LPL supposedly because he wasn't able to get to Diamond 1 in that server. So like they were threatening, but it's not that they were threatening him. Everyone is supposed to maintain that requirement in the professional league, but he was the only one not meeting that qualification. So my what I think is that because of the toxicity issue in North America, I think that Riot should require every single person who wants to play in the ranked environment to sign up for an account using their real name, using their identity, and attaching a real person to the account. Because once you do that, you can't run around screaming obscenities at people and being a psychopath and just not being able to deal with it because of the anonymity. So once you do that and like you have them locked into a solid IP address and stuff like that, this person becomes a problem. You kick them out of the server. It's that easy. You can let them play normal League of Legends, let them play with their friends, whatever, but you cannot play in the elite server anymore. You know what I mean? I think that's a great way to fix this. It would require some money, but I think Riot is actually right now in a pretty precarious spot in North America because there are so many games that other people play. I think that everyone is hardcore addicted to League, so it's not going anywhere, but they do kind of run the risk of losing that casual player because of how insanely bad the solo queue environment is. So they either have to go the ranked 5s route, or if they want to stick to solo queue, build a new server. But give me your rankings one more time. We'll talk about a few of the other spots that seem a little off.
Yeah. So
C9 100 Thieves.
In order: C9 100 Thieves, FlyQuest, Team Liquid, TSM, CLG, Immortals, Evil Geniuses, Golden Guardians, Dignitas.
Okay, so I have. Let me just put my rankings next to it. It'll be a little easier to see. So you have Evil Geniuses pretty low. I think that it makes sense based on results. I'm much more focused on like talent and like the qualitative stuff. So I understand the difference that we have there, which is reasonable. Last weekend, EG lost to Golden Guardians and CLG, both pretty bad losses. The CLG loss was particularly bad because of how they lost. They had a lead, and they kind of threw that one away. FlyQuest has been on a pretty big losing streak. I've been pretty skeptical of FlyQuest for most of the split because I have always had gigantic questions about their bot lane. So Wild Turtle, pretty questionable player in general, and then they took him out and put Mash. Mash is not a big improvement from Wild Turtle, even though they won 1 or 2 games with Mash Me originally.
They're certainly getting them a lot of reps going double duty on the academy and main roster.
Yeah, it wasn't going to be a positive change for their team in the long run. Like, you might get a couple of results, but long term they have to figure out a different solution besides Mash, who used to be called Don't Mash Me. He is not a long term solution. So I understand. I guess that's kind of what I'm afraid of with FlyQuest being so sticky up top. So they must have had some gigantic wins in the early season and then close gold losses in recent matches. Team Liquid and TSM being up there is fine. Evil Geniuses, there's a big disparity, like we mentioned. CLG is roughly the same. Immortals is roughly the same. Golden Guardians, you have a little bit higher, which is fine. I don't have any big problems with most of these rankings. Dignitas are on the same page. So it's really just 100 Thieves and Evil Geniuses have basically flipped in my rankings and your rankings, or the ego rankings. Which I think is reasonable compared to like the way that Evil Geniuses wins. When they win, they don't necessarily have a gigantic gold lead. They're more of playing like a positional chess kind of game where it's going to look ugly, but they're up a pawn and they're going to convert that pawn and they're going to win. That's kind of what I get. They're like a grinder. They're like a grinding team.
Yeah. And as I mentioned, one way that, or one sort of lens that I like to look at these numbers through is sort of floor and ceiling for each team over the past, sort of 10-game look back or whatever it is. And for, I think for both 100 Thieves and Evil Geniuses, I think you see sort of, I think some of this is just the 1-game lead, but you see the volatility in sort of both of them. The Evil Geniuses 5 games ago was the second-ranked team in the league, and then they've gone on this streak where I think their last 6 have been, they have 2 wins over Dignitas and who's the other one? And Immortals, who are the bottom of my rankings. and then 4 losses to the top teams. So that's sort of just been a steady week, steady, five game plunge. And 100 Thieves has just been the opposite. They, since the loss to Golden Guardians, they've been, knocking off top teams. But, they could easily, to me, I'm not going to say, because one is ranked second and one is ranked 8th right now, that means that one is good and one is not, because, the numbers themselves show that a couple weeks from now, they could, they have the potential to, fall off in the case of 100 Thieves or get right back up there for Evil Geniuses.
Yeah, so I think the main thing that we should take away from this before moving on to the next one is that FlyQuest is still a middle of the pack team. It's ranked a little higher in yours because I think of the look back, like how it kind of ranks those things. So I think they are trending down from where you have them. I'm not sure how much further they could trend down from where I have them. Just from a talent perspective, they are still more talented than a lot of the teams in North America. The big difference is that people should feel bad about Evil Geniuses at this point, because they have been losing a lot. And for DraftKings purposes specifically, they're not generally a very high kill score team. They helped me win a ticket in a loss, which was great. Thanks a lot, Evil Geniuses. But it's few and far. The number of times that you can roster Evil Geniuses and feel really good about it is few and far between. They will have an ownership dip, I'm assuming, this weekend, which is a good spot to kind of leverage if they get back to their winning ways in some of their next matches. Let's see who they have this weekend. That should be a big benefit. So they have Team Liquid. Oh, Team Liquid in Cloud9. Never mind. I mean, maybe against Cloud9 they can pull something out, but the Team Liquid match probably won't be a very good scoring match. 100 Thieves, I think that everyone's going to be super high on them. 100 Thieves against TSM. I'm sure people will be saying that they should beat TSM because they just beat Cloud9. I think TSM should definitely still be the favorite, and same with Team Liquid. So let's go into Europe. Nothing should have changed last week in Europe, right? Because there weren't any matches.
I don't think there may have been. I sort of I have like a rolling, with the rolling look back, some data dropped out, even though no new data went in.
That is actually probably very good for us, because it will give us a more accurate picture of what people are thinking going into the teams coming back.
Yeah, and I think you're right about that, and also with with both the LCS and the LEC, with the season starting or with the 1-game season and the starting a little bit later than the LPL, they've now just sort of arrived at the point where it's pretty much all, or I think maybe even all for most of these teams, summer split data. So I think that's a interesting twist to it as well.
Sure.
So I can go first here. So for the LEC, I have G2 up top, Fnatic second, Rogue third, which is the big mover here in terms of change.
Who'd you have?
Was that G2 first, Fnatic second, and Rogue third? Okay. Rogue has been the big mover in the summer split in these numbers. Mad Lions fourth, Misfits fifth, XL sixth, Origin seventh, SK eighth, Vitality 9th, and Schalke in the basement.
Yeah. So this has been interesting, the way that we've looked at these teams, because I think that from a talent perspective, I think that G2 is the best team. From a talent perspective, I think Fnatic is the second best team. For talent for right now. I know that Mad Lions and Rogue are younger, and maybe they will be better next year or the year after that. But until they start actually proving themselves against G2 and Fnatic consistently, it's really tough to kind of pick them in a best of 3 or a best of 5 over one of the stalwarts from Europe. So I think that right now the top 4, Fnatic is actually really low in terms of their results, so I think a lot of people are going to be very afraid of them in DraftKings, but they shouldn't be. So we'll see how smart the ownership is on that one.
And it feels like this is just me sort of regurgitating things I've heard and not because I don't have the insight here, but feels like that team could make benefit the most of any from the week off. I think there was some just they were talking about this at the end of the LAC broadcast, just sort of a couple bad losses and they seem sort of a little bit disjointed. So maybe having a week to practice and sort of just try some new things and sort of find themselves again.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting dynamic because LS, the analyst / announcer from LCK, he does a lot of coaching and he has a lot of influence on some of these players. And he has consistently talked to Bwipo and Nemesis about League of Legends in general. So I think they are really kind of having they're really being heavily impacted by LS. And I think that the transmission of information from LS to a lot of these professional players is it's a good thing long term to show like that someone who is relatively intelligent can impact the professional players' opinions of things instead of them just relying on their experience of the game. But I feel like they're not close enough to kind of get the full explanation of why it should work the way that it does, because they're playing things like Twisted Fate at a ridiculous clip when in reality they haven't had great success on it. So in order for them to justify continuing to play Twisted Fate and continuing to play this playstyle, they kind of need to chalk it all up to variance. But they should probably look at it as like we're not executing things correctly, and if they're not able to kind of figure out that game plan for Twisted Fate, they should abandon it, I think. So they've always been a team that kind of has interesting picks that they pull out, but sometimes it just makes everyone feel like the community feel a lot better if they play something that's kind of simple, predictable, and they look good on it, because at least at that point we know that they can do plan A very well, and then if they're pivoting off of it to go to plan B, then okay. But I think even Reckless mentioned that like they were trying a lot of different team compositions and strategies because they know that in order to beat G2 in the long run, they'll have to have more in their arsenal. But with the LEC, I don't think we have to spend much time here. There's really a divide, I think, in my opinion. I don't know if the EGO rankings show this as well, between the top 5 and the bottom 5 teams. Is there a divide there still?
Sorry.
Because like Origin and XL, Origin's probably the team that's closest to the top 5, but they're making roster changes now. They signed Jack Troll and got rid of Destiny, and Jack Troll is not a good player. Not a world caliber player. Hardly a European caliber player.
Yeah. So I think the way that the EGOT rankings sort of have it is sort of 4 up top with G2, Fnatic, Rogue, and Mad Lions, with certainly G2 and Fnatic being a top 2 and the other 2 sort of chasing them. Origin, SK, Vitality, and Schalke as a bottom 4, and then Misfits and XL as sort of in between. I think Misfits has sort of been hanging around that sort of middle of the pack status for the full split, whereas XL started at the bottom and now has sort of creeped up within just a couple percentage points of Misfits.
Yeah, I think Misfits is trending in the right direction. I'm big on Misfits second half of the season. Let's go into Korea. So we have 10 teams to go through. With some of the changes that some of the results that we've seen this week, I'm sure that this will kind of swing a little bit. So what do you have?
Yeah, and so this has been these have been the most interesting to me, sort of the ebb and flow of these over the season.
Wait, let me guess before you even say anything. Let me guess.
Yeah.
So T1.
Okay.
T1 is going to drop a couple of spots because the losses to Dynamics are pretty bad, and they may have had some other games that they dropped, right? If they played more than one match this week. So I would think T1 is going down. I think Damwon Gaming is going up. DRX is probably like shifting a little bit downward just because of their surprise result against KT. And then Sandbox Gaming is probably shooting up the rankings, which is tragic for me. And then Team Dynamics. So I think there's probably still separation between the top 4 teams and the rest of the league, but I think that Dynamics and Sandbox are like the top of the second tier. Is that accurate?
You got most of it right. You'll be relieved to know that Sandbox did not all of a sudden move into any type of respectable position. They've moved out of just completely abysmal and hopeless. They've been replaced in that spot by Solon Prince.
So Solon Prince is 10?
They're 10, yeah. So you nailed it on the real divide between the top four and everybody else. So Damwon number 1, DRX number 2, and T13 Genji 4th. And again, you were basically right. DRX sort of hovered while Damwon jumped them, and T1 fell behind them and sort of flip flopped. Mm-hmm. And then 5th is Afrika. Yeah. 6th is KT. Mm-hmm. 7th is Dynamics. They finally have all of the one sort of lingering thing, which was artificially inflating their numbers, were the promotion games against Cerebral, or however you say that
Cerebral
word.
I didn't think about that, but it is kind of like Cerebral. That's interesting. I wonder if they knew that they were doing that. That's interesting. Probably not.
Yeah, I love their logo, by the way. Yeah. That, like the sort of like beach killer theme. Yeah, cool. And then Sandbox 7th, Hanwha 9th, and Dynamics 7th, Sandbox 8th, Hanwha 9th, and SP 10th.
Yeah.
And then I think the big divide here. So 0 is an average team. Genji is at 3,100, and Damwon is at 5,400. So that's sort of the range of the top teams. Yeah. The bottom teams, Afrika is at minus 1,100, and SP is at minus 4,000. One way that I sort of think about these numbers, and part of the reason why I've come up with the or why I break it down by sort of these 10%, 20% differences, is I'd have to look at my DMs to find his name, but one of the guys who does the Opal casts, I watch it when the English stream for the LPL is off.
Yeah.
Mentioned in his stream back in like March or April that there's some number somewhere that say in any given game that the when a gold lead becomes statistically significant is at a 10% difference. So you take the total amount combined between the two teams, look at the gap, and if it's 10% or more, the leading team is a statistically significantly improved chance of winning the game. Yeah. And so with an average game having roughly 50,000 gold in these numbers, that 5,000 gap is what I look at as sort of a really key difference.
Yeah.
And here you see basically that much between 4th and 5th. So I think just sort of a long-winded way of saying that I think there really is a big gap between these top 4 teams and the bottom 6.
Yeah, so that makes sense from a statistical perspective. I think it is probably very noisy. So basically from what I've seen in professional play, just watching almost every game for the past couple of years, I think that 2,000 gold is probably a more relevant number for most of the game. And I know it might seem like an insignificant amount of gold, but if you can build a 2,000 gold lead at the 10-minute mark, obviously you're extremely far ahead. If you can have a 2,000 gold lead at the 20-minute mark, what's the average gold at 20 minutes? Do you have that or no? Because it should be.
I don't have that, but I mean, if you figure it's probably higher later in the game, right? So it's probably something like 30,000.
Yeah. So at the 10-minute mark, you should have 1 finished item. At the 20-minute mark, you should have 1.5 to 2 completed items. Generally, in in a slow-paced professional game, as opposed to solo queue. So if it was 2, it would be like 6,000, maybe 7,000 gold per player, or 7,000 gold per carry. So that would be 21,000 plus like 4 or 5k gold from a support and a jungle, or maybe a little more from the jungle. So yeah, probably 30,000 at the 20-minute mark, I think, for each team. So that is what would a 10% difference be in that situation? So if it's 30,000 gold at 20 minutes, it would be 15, like a 1,500,
Three?
a 1,500 gold advantage would mean that you have plus 1,500, they have minus 1,500, so that's a 3,000 gold difference. Or would it be? It would need to be.
I think it'd be 3,000.
So it would need to be 3,000. Okay.
Yeah. 15 would be 5, and yeah.
So the reason why I kind of disagree with it at that point, then I think that the 2,000 would probably still be relatively accurate in predicting a winner. Well, it definitely would be accurate. I think it would still be like 60%, 70%. Especially when the good team is the one with the advantage, because the item breakpoints are extremely important. So if you have a finished item instead of the component pieces for the item, the gold efficiency is much different. So like the gold efficiency for component pieces are almost always under 100%. The gold efficiency for finished items is almost always over 100%. So it's not only that you've accumulated more gold, you've also spent the gold more efficiently, which is basically like you earned more gold than the enemy team. So I think it'd be interesting to see what the numbers would say instead of using it as gold earned, which is most of the statistics that we have for professional play, if it's gold spent. So if there was a way to track items in game, you'd be able to watch in real time what the actual gold advantage is, and it would help determine like team fights and stuff like that, or like maybe different ways that you should play out the team fight. That's actually one of the things I was working on a few years ago, was like a counting system for the different items. So it's like even if you just did it based off of the cost of the items, you would get a rough idea of what the gold difference is between the two teams. So let's say you had, I mean, I don't want to get too specific, but you would basically take the finished items from each team, assign a number to those items based off of the cost. So let's say Trinity Force. Trinity Force is 3,733 gold. That would be 37, right? So that's the number for Triforce is 37, and then the other team has a rapid fire cannon or something like that, which is 2,600 gold or 2,500 gold, right around there. Actually, it might be 2,400 gold now, somewhere in that range. So it's like basically 25 versus a 37. The 37 should win, and it's obviously very reductionist, but I think that the analysis that I've done with it, it's pretty accurate. And like you can make adjustments for that. So if you know that the gold efficiency is different, then you just manipulate that number a little bit. But that would need to be a system that you need to teach the players and also game plan around. So during the pick ban phase, when you're picking your champions, every champion has a specified build path that is most likely going to happen during the game. So if I know that the other team picks Aphelios first, I know that he's going to build an Infinity Edge. I know that he's going to build a Runan's Hurricane. I know that he's probably going to build either like an Edge of Night if there's a lot of like CC threats on the other team. Maybe he has to build a Quicksilver Sash. Maybe he builds a second crit item. So I basically have an idea of what that number is for that champion. So that should be like 36 plus 26 plus 26 again, or something like that. So that's the core number of that champion. And then you could pick a number higher or lower with the other 80 carries that are available to attack the strengths and weaknesses of Aphelios. So that's another way to go at creating a competitive advantage outside of gameplay. It's like letting the numbers of the items lead you to potential counters against that champion. Or if you want to match it, you just pick a similar champion with a similar build. But Aphelios is kind of a unique case because his abilities and his kit make him better than a lot of other champions. And that's why he's Mr. 200 years and no one else is. So that's good for Korea. I think that I'm glad that the fighting Yamato cannons have not shot up the rankings, because that would literally kill me. So let's just go to China.
I guess just I just found this DM, and I think it sort of supports what you were saying. So the caster here, it was Grant Beard at Hypertension, and this 10% sort of gold lead barometer. I asked him if there were like hard numbers I could look at anywhere, and he said it's more of a spoken point. There's some LCS numbers somewhere that basically get to something similar, but it only looks at what they called overwhelming victories, which were a 33% difference or more. They found that to be a deficit from which there's literally no return. And then he said that in sort of the spoken word, sort of rule of thumb, that something even half that much is still very significant. That ends up being sort of an 8 to 10% difference. And I think if you take that 8% number, that sort of 2,000 gold lead at 20 minutes is probably right around there.
Yeah, and I didn't need one of you fancy stat boys telling me that it was 10% or 20%. I have my guns, I have my Aphelios, my 200 years, 2,000 gold difference. All I need, America. So yeah, basically, it's that's the kind of thing that I'm talking about, where it's like, in baseball, you need the stats to help you. In League of Legends, you need common sense and like paying attention to kind of help you, because there are so many numbers in that game. It's just like, it's so overwhelming. And the stats don't really tell you anything. Like they're basically giving me a stat that says, "Oh, did you know that when you are winning by a lot, your chances of winning is a lot?" It's like, what are we doing here? So all right, let's go to LPL. What do you got? What do you got for me?
LPL, we have so actually do you want to go through what you have on? I think I forgot to add
Sure, no problem. Your camera dropped a little bit, so now I'm seeing your Ken Griffey Jr. shirt. It's pretty cool.
Yeah. I'm sorry. I'm working on the screen behind it. I'm adding last night's games to the numbers.
I'm not accusing you of anything, but this is the
yeah.
second week in a row.
I'm trying to get, you got to get
Junior,
the kid as much airtime as you can. So.
This is the second week where we have seen the camera shift towards the shirt aggressively. So last week you had some kind of plumbing company on your shirt. I don't know if you have some kind of deal where you're trying to get free advertising for this plumbing company. And then now we have Ken Griffey Jr. Ken Griffey Jr. is obviously in BVE's pocket. This is what we need. This is what we need to take away from this situation. So
he's retired, but he's not old enough to collect Social Security. So you gotta get that income from somewhere.
Fair enough. So camera's still a little low, but we'll deal with that once you have your rankings in front of you.
Yeah. I'll be back in 2 seconds here.
Word. So basically, from last week when I did my rankings, I have Top Esports as the number 1 team in China. Next up is FPX. Basically, I have it separated into world-class contenders, regional contenders, and disappointments, and then like everybody else. So the world-class teams right now, in my opinion, from China, well, they were Top Esports and FPX. V5 is making it real tough not to have them, at least in the contenders bracket. The contenders right now are Invictus Gaming and JDG. JDG, the public consensus is going the wrong direction on them. Everybody thinks that they're not as good as they were in the past because they're so focused on Top Esports. I think that's a mistake. I think JDG is still one of the best teams in China, even though I am Mr. Regression when it comes to JDG. Invictus Gaming, I love them. Everybody tilts off the face of the earth because of them, but I love them even more for that, so thank you, Invictus Gaming. Regional contenders, V5, Sunning, World Elite, LGD, RNG, and EDG. These are all the teams that I think will be a factor in playoffs potentially. Can give some of the big teams like close matches and win a game off of them, or maybe even take a series if the matchup is good enough. Like the stylistic differences of the team may benefit the regional contenders. The disappointments from China are Vici Gaming, and it's only Vici Gaming, because everyone was very hyped up on iBoy and all of that, and like Leon coming to the team. Not that they were hyped, it's just I feel like maybe I'm just disappointed in them. Like they should be better than they are. And now that they have Zika, they're kind of moving in the right direction. And then the next tier of teams I have are Billy Gaming, OMG, Rogue Warriors, E-Star, and LNG. It's pretty tough to differentiate between those teams in my opinion. Like I have personal favorites, but I'm not going to pretend like one is significantly better than the other. And then last we have Dominus. I think Dominus is the worst team in China right now. And that's probably not going to change when I redo my rankings today. So what do you have for the LPL?
Yeah. So similar with I think a couple notable exceptions here. So Top Esports, a clear number 1 despite the loss. JDG, a clear number 2, and really steady Eddie. As I said, I look at the 10 game look back is important here, and sort of I have my red and green shading, and any team that's sort of all green I sort of say is a good team, and JDG has been that consistently.
Yeah, the one thing I would say about that is when we first started talking about this, I was using the term like I was telling you to consider the term dominator rating or dominator ranking or something, and that's kind of why, is because I know JDG, they're consistently winning these matches 2-0, putting the smackdown on people, and that's exactly what I would expect a statistic like this to kind of look for. So I'm not surprised by that.
Absolutely. And the next tier would be FPX, V5, and Invictus. They're all grouped closely together. Echoing your point on V5, so not my ego rankings, but my sort of win-loss projection model that I use for my DFS stuff, gave V5 the Top Esports was a 60% favorite in my model the other night, and I was like, no way, like it just seemed like that number should be way higher, and so I restricted my ownership on V5 to my own detriment. So
Sure.
I'm there with you.
What was the Vegas
at
line
this
on
point,
that? The Vegas line was pretty high, right? Or I could actually check that. So you can just keep going, and I'll check that real quick.
Yeah, I have it too if you can't find it, but I'll keep going in the meantime. The next tier is LGD, RNG, and OMG, which is surprisingly high to me.
LGD, OMG, RNG?
LGD, RNG, OMG, correct. The next tier down is WE, EDG, and BLG. WE is another one that's been a little surprising to me. 2 weeks ago, they were sort of in that, knocking on the door of that Invictus Gaming V5 tier, and almost through no fault of their own. It's not so much that they've really fallen off a ton. It's more that these other teams have sort of had some quality wins that have pushed them past them. WE, EDG, and BLG in that tier. Next tier down is Suning, Vici, E-Star, and DMO. Suning, similar thing to WE. They're a team that I like a lot. They've been sort of hovering right around average, and it's just sort of, I think the win, I forget who they played the other night, but just sort of the other team kept it closer than I think Vegas expected, and that hurt them here, or sort of just kept them where they were.
Yeah.
And then LNG and Rogue Warriors in the basement. We talked about Rogue Warriors last week, and I posted a short Twitter thread that their play style hurts them in these numbers, I don't think that they're really the worst team in the LPL as last night certainly was evidence of.
Yeah, so let me read it back to you just to make sure I have it right, because I think I have something wrong.
Yeah.
So it's Top Esports. Wait, I think I found it. Okay, so this should be 6, 7, 8. No, yeah, this is getting all messed up. So Top Esports, JDG, FPX, V5, Invictus Gaming, LGD, RNG, World Elite, EDG, BLG, Sunning, E-Star, DMO, LNG, Rogue Warriors.
Vici is in between Suning and E-Star.
Yes. Okay. All right. So yeah, I have it messed up on my screen somehow, but I'm not. It's like the kind of thing where I can't really even see it with my eyes, so it's gonna like drive me insane figuring it out. If I have to say the surprising,
the Top Esports, I had them as a 60% favorite. Vegas had them at 73%. What's the money line on that? Minus 267.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. Yeah. So Sunning, I think Sunning deserves to be higher than where you have them. Maybe not as high as I have them in my rankings, but a lot of mine is based off of my projections for how the meta is going to shift, and that at the end of the split, Sunning, if they are the team that I think they are, they will be competitive because of the meta shifts, like very competitive because of the meta shifts.
Yeah.
And
they're a team I like as well.
Yeah. So they have shown champion versatility, meta resilience, a lot of like qualitative things that you won't really find in the numbers or the data, like other data. Like if you're looking at like the champions that they play, that's not going to be easy to find if you don't know what you're looking for. So that's the kind of thing that I also don't think the typical League of Legends fan pays much attention to either. So it's not necessarily like an outsider coming into League of Legends won't find it. I think most people don't look at that kind of stuff, don't think about that kind of stuff, because they're, for lack of a better term, meta slave. That's kind of like a term that's thrown around in League of Legends a lot, where they just blindly follow what everyone else says is good, or like what they see on pro play, what they see the professionals playing in their solo queue games, and they just try to copy it. It's monkey see, monkey do, and they don't understand the reasoning behind it, or like the actual win conditions behind it. So Sunning is a team that has been anticipating the shifts in the meta, has been able to keep up with the meta, and that's very important when we see other teams that have trouble doing that. Other surprises?
Yeah. I think sort of in my mind, I feel like, maybe not in a 10-game sample, but when I sort of look at a longer range sample in this, that's something that I think that where you can find that in the numbers is the fact that Suning never falls into the basement. OMG, even RNG, they've had periods in these rankings where they've fallen really low for a couple weeks at a time.
Yeah.
Whereas Suning is, regardless of the meta, regardless of sort of who they're playing, what's going on around them, they find ways to consistently be good, even though they haven't sort of been great yet.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. So, were there any other takeaways you had from your rankings this week that you thought were notable?
OMG moving up. They were a team that for the first 3-4 weeks of the split were bottom 5 or so, and have been steadily moving up despite what feels like really no changes and no sort of signature wins that I can remember.
Yeah.
So that's one that I'm keeping an eye on. They're a team that I think they're decent from a DFS. I feel like all the LPL teams are decent from a DFS perspective, because generally prefer them to the LCK teams on these combined slates.
Yeah.
But so they're a team that I've liked. Icon is I think a good DFS player. I don't know if he's how good he is from an actual gameplay perspective. So I'm not discounting that yet, but it's something I'm keeping an eye on.
Cool. All right. Well, that's about it. I'm going to have to do the rest of my rankings. I did my reaction video to ESPN again. Maybe I guess I didn't tell you much about that, but maybe it is a good thing to look at for the differences between the huge shifts that we saw in their rankings compared to the Ego rankings. So the teams that dropped the furthest were FlyQuest, LNG, OMG, Evil Geniuses, CLG. Those were the ones that really moved the most. So OMG is moving down in their rankings, and they're moving up in your rankings. That's pretty interesting. FlyQuest, we both have, you both have going down. Vici Gaming, they have rising up significantly, which didn't happen in yours, right?
Vici's still in sort of the bottom of the LPL, but so that the look back, I guess, is the look back here is it's not steady state, right? The sort of the ranking for whatever team 10 games ago is not going to be the same 10 games from now, because the strength of schedule shifts based on other teams winning and stuff. But sort of as of right now, 10 games ago, Vici was the second worst team, and now they're fifth. But they're basically within a stone's throw of average, whereas below they were before they were
Wait, they're in fifth now? I thought they were in 12th.
Fifth from the bottom.
Okay, yeah, okay. I was like, whoa, what did I miss?
So they've definitely gained ground. They're 1,700 gold closer to average than they were sort of 3 series ago.
Yeah.
So I think that summary, I have them lower than ESPN, but agree that they're moving up.
Yeah, so ESPN I think is just more volatile with how they move teams around. Like a flashy victory is very important to ESPN. Also, I think ESPN's rankings are absolutely garbage. So when I say that you're doing something and they're not, it's probably a good thing for you. You should take that as a compliment. KT, they've moved up 12 spots because of their win over DRX. Sandbox, off of their couple of victories, they moved up 12 spots. 100 Thieves, off of their off of their 3-game win streak, has moved up 3 spots. LGD moved up 9 spots to 20th, and now they lost last night, so I'm sure they'll be dropping down again. But yeah, those are some of the key differences between how they view things, how you all view things. So yeah, that's about it. Thanks again.
Yeah.
Thanks again for stopping by and discussing your EGOAT rankings with us.
Glad to be here, man.
All right, sounds good. Good luck this week. Good luck to everybody watching, unless you're playing against me, in which case I hope you forget to set your lineup. But thanks again for watching.
Oh, come on, man. You got to hope they come in second.
No, thanks again for watching. Thanks again for participating, and I will talk to you all later.